slot of light.
Rolling. Whenever you'd like to start.
Really?
I can bring everyone.
Bon retour parmi nous au forum. Welcome back. Donc, c'est le forum aujourd'hui des droits de la personne. Pour tous ceux et celles qui viennent de se joindre à nous via Internet, je m'appelle Gabrielle Marleau et je suis votre maître de cérémonie aujourd'hui.
And welcome back. I'm Daniel Sadler, co-host of the Winnipeg Youth Forum on Human Rights. There will be two...
Re-bienvenue, je suis le co-maître des cérémonies. Tout d'abord, un panel avec des leaders jeunesse au Canada et des militants qui représentent déjà le Canada de toutes sortes de façons. Ensuite, il va y avoir une série de rapports venant des ateliers de ce matin. Ils vont nous résumer le contenu de leur discussion. Nous encourageons les gens sur l'Internet de participer. On peut tout simplement, on clique sur le piton Participate, participer. Ensuite, vous entrez votre adresse courriel. Ensuite, vous écrivez votre question dans l'espace en bas et vous poussez Envoyer ou Send. Ensuite, vous pouvez envoyer.
Feedback to the questions we pose to our dedicated email, which is form150@experiencescanada.ca. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you Senator Marilou McPhedran, who will moderate this afternoon's panel presentation. So, Marilou's record of achievements, leadership positions, founding initiatives, and Canadian representations on the international stage would take me the full hour to appropriately list. Her bio modestly summarizes her distinguished career as a human rights activist like this. She is a lawyer and educator who specialized in teaching and developing systematic and sustainable change mechanisms to promote equality and diversity. In addition to her teaching and Senate responsibilities, her current focus for volunteer work is on strategies to augment diversity in government and civil society organizations that focus on women, peace and security, and defending human rights through the inclusion of youth and Indigenous peoples. Please welcome Marilou McPhedran.
Thank you.
Donc, la première présentation d'aujourd'hui est un...
So today's first presentation is a panel where we have young leaders, all Canadians, who get involved in their own communities in all kinds of ways. First, Marilou McPhedran was born in the wilds of Manitoba. She was appointed member of Canada, member of the Order of Canada in 1985 for having led the campaign to protect the equality of men and women in the Canadian Constitution. Prime Minister Trudeau appointed her to the Senate in 2016.
Of our country, we get to do everything twice. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. I was pleased when I was able to be here earlier today to know that we acknowledge that we are on the land of First Nations people. If you don't know the story of the building of this museum and the engagement with Aboriginal elders in ensuring that this is, yes, on sacred land, but built in a way that has been very respectful of the occupation of the land by this building and now by us, please do look into that. It's a fascinating story. I also want to very much thank Experiences Canada, Deborah Morrison, Deborah Davis, and my former student and colleague, Jaron Hart, for the opportunity to be here today. It means a great deal. And I'm very honored to have followed a mentor of mine, the Dr. Lloyd Axworthy, who has had a tremendous influence on my way of understanding the world. He invited me, encouraged me to come back to my home province and to lead a new human rights degree program at a new college that he created at the University of Winnipeg when he left politics and became the president of the university. And that is Global College. And I actually teach here in the museum every August. and we have a strong learning partnership with the museum. So I understand you have had a chance to go through the galleries. I hope you'll take maximum opportunity in order to experience the museum, both guided, which is wonderful, but also just on your own learning journey. And I'm very honored to be asked to be part of this panel, and I'm particularly pleased to share the stage with such distinguished and innovative thinkers as we're going to hear from today. Let me give you just a sketch of how we've organized ourselves for today. Each person is going to speak for 8 minutes. If we go slightly over, then probably my timer will sound, and that will give us a reminder of 1 minute to go. And then we will open this up for questions. And we're going to be very respectful of each other's time because we don't want to steal your time to ask questions and to engage in an open discussion. So you'll forgive me for being a little professorial about the timekeeping, but I will help us stick to our time as much as possible. In opening, I'd like to just briefly introduce my co-panelists, and then I've been asked to speak very briefly about some of my learnings and my journey in my life. And so immediately to my left, I have Hassan Syed, and next to Hassan, we have Derek Juno. And next to Derek, we have Safia Rafikadun. And as I turn over to each speaker, I'll give you a brief introduction of them before they begin to speak. So just very quickly about myself, I was born and raised here in Manitoba, but not in Winnipeg. I come from a rural background. I grew up in a small town called Nipawa, but I didn't really grow up inside the town. And when people ask me about influences in my life, I have come to realize that actually my childhood in a rural setting on the edge of a small town, we lived on the edge of the town. My dad was the town veterinarian, and we kept horses and numerous other animals that my father would bring home. He often brought home wounded animals. And so we had a big pasture on the edge of town where we kept this menagerie. And my sisters and I, we didn't have any boys in the family, my sisters and I went riding. And when I look back on it now, as a mother who raised my sons in New York City and Toronto, I'm amazed at the fact that I would get on a horse at the age of 8 or 9 and go for the day. Nobody could have found us if they wanted to. No cell phones, no way, and that was the sense of freedom that I grew up with which I think very, very, very few children have that, and I think I'm incredibly lucky that we managed to remain safe on those adventures, even at that early age. And I raise that now because working on human rights is something that when one chooses to do that, it sets up all kinds of contradictions every day in our life, especially when, as I have, one gets to live a privileged life. I come from an upper middle class family, my skin is white, getting a good education was never a question, never an issue, and that kind of privilege can often be invisible. And indeed, I think it was invisible to me until at the age of 19, I ended up becoming the first woman student president at the University of Winnipeg. And all of a sudden, I began to experience sexism, which I'll be honest with you, had not been part of my upbringing. My girlfriends and I basically ran everything in our small town, in our high school, and the fact that there were actions and words directed at me because I was female really was a powerful learning experience for me. I left Winnipeg as soon as my term as the student president ended. I transferred to the University of Toronto, And the rest of my education, both finishing my BA and then going on to law school, happened in Toronto. And for most of my adult life, I have lived away from Manitoba until Dr. Axworthy created Global College and I came back to help design and launch the Human Rights degree program that we run there. So in those intervening years, in a number of the circumstances where I ended up working on a particular human rights issue, very often to do with disability rights and or the intersectionality that would have an emphasis on women's rights. Very seldom did I plan any of that. Those issues, those situations seemed to find me. And we all get to choose in those moments. Am I going to work on this? There are so many choices we can make to do a range of human rights work. And as we mature, we realize that we want to have a family, likely. We want to have choices in our life. And that means we have to earn an income. And it's actually very challenging to work on human rights and earn a decent income very often. And so a number of the projects that I worked on when I graduated from law school and was called to the bar, I made a promise to myself that 30% of my time would always be volunteer, that 30% of what I did in my work life I would not get paid for. In law, it's called pro bono, and that translates from Latin as for good. I can't tell you, honestly, that everything I worked on was necessarily for good. Often our intentions are very, very good and pure, but they don't always turn out the way you hope they will, because human rights is about our daily lives, essentially. And what I say to my students is that it's one thing to know your rights. And in Canada, with a constitutional democracy and an entrenched charter of rights and freedoms, most of us are exposed in our earlier school years to that basic knowledge of our human rights. But it's completely different to claim your rights or to stand with people that are trying to claim their rights. And then again, it's completely different to actually reach that point where you can live your rights. Because I was able to get here a little bit early and catch the end of Dr. Axworthy's speech, and I was listening in on a number of discussions, I could hear many of you raising some of these points and how to live the life you want and keep a portion of your life committed to human rights. Well, the wonderful news I have for you for this panel is that that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about as well. And so what I would like to do now is introduce the first speaker, Hassan Syed. And I'll just, it's in the program, so please feel welcome to look at it in more detail. But Hassan graduated from Western University, and he completed a BA from the Richard Ivey School of Business, along with a certificate in corporate sustainability. And that has taken Hassan to being a delegate of the Government of Canada delegation to the 71st Assembly of the United Nations, which, if you want to see and experience a complex institution, just get yourself to New York and see anything related to the UN, because it is a place where to actually get something done is tremendously challenging. So I would like you to join with me in welcoming Hassan.
Is there a clicker? One of the clickers? Hello, everyone. Oh, there we go. Okay, so my name is Hassan Syed, and one of the primary reasons I'm up here is because last October, I had the opportunity of a lifetime to represent young Canadians at the 71st General UN Assembly in New York, where I was one of about 30 countries from around the world that sent youth delegations. And over the course of 3 weeks, I spent time working alongside the the diplomats in New York from the Canadian mission, touring the UN HQ, delivering presentations at the General Assembly, brushing shoulders with global ambassadors from all over the world, and meeting ministers in the Parliament building. So you might be thinking, wow, this guy must be really smart and cool and talented. But I'm going to tell you my story, because for a long time, things weren't so great for me. I grew up in Pakistan, that's where I was born, and my family moved to Canada when I was 8 years old. And my dad wasn't able to get a job in Canada, so he was working minimum wage trying to raise a family of 5. And we lived in a small one-bedroom apartment. We never took vacations, never went out to eat, and for a long time, we didn't even have mattresses to sleep on until my brother got a job at the Brick. So growing up, I didn't have a lot of confidence, as you can imagine. But then the one thing I did have was a trigger moment, is what I call it. So here I was in grade 6 with 150 grade 6 students from the graduating class of my public school, and we went to this leadership retreat center in the outskirts of Toronto as part of our grad trip. And we're playing this game called Kick the Can, where one person stands in the middle of the field, and there's all these other kids hidden in the forest on the outskirts. And the kids have to run in the middle of the field and kick the can before the person that's guarding it calls out their name. And one of the things I hated to do was losing at anything, especially sports. So this one girl that was guarding this can was really good. She was really popular, knew everyone. And one by one, I saw everyone get out, and it made me furious. So there was about 50 of us still left hiding, and I called everyone together. I said, guys, come on, let's make a plan. And before this moment, I had never done anything like this. I had never tried to speak out, tried to take a leadership role, or tried to assemble a group together. But I was determined to win this game. So I got everyone together, and with a very passionate, endearing voice and a very motivational speech, I said, we must work together and go out at the same time. And people were like, oh, that sounds like a good plan, all right, yeah. So we all hid, and on my mark, I said, 3, 2, 1, charge! It was like a scene from Lord of the Rings. And everyone runs out to the middle of the field, and one person eventually kicks it over. And it was at that moment, oh, I didn't realize there was another graphic there. That's how it looks like. So this is where all us. And at that moment, this match lit inside my heart where I thought, if I say things with enough passion and conviction, people will listen. And with that fire, I carried it to university, to high school, and it transcended into a lot of really cool opportunities and moments for me. I've traveled to 6 different countries and didn't pay a dime for it, graduated with 2 degrees from one of the best universities in Canada, where I had 60% of my education tuition sponsored through different scholarships and grants. I have presented at multiple different conferences and delivered presentations and motivational speaking opportunities. But that's not the point that I'm trying to make. I'm not trying to come up here and tell you that I'm special, because at the end of the day, I'm not really. I just found a very lucky chair to sit in, which, that's Stefan Dion's chair. He probably wouldn't be very happy if he knew I was sitting in it and gloating about it. But when I was in New York, people would come up to me all the time and say, how's Justin Trudeau? He's really great the way he talks about young people and promotes young people. And for a long time, I just thought that was normal. That, yeah, he's got great hair, great smile, says really great things. But I'd never thought about how he empowers young people and all the great programs that he's invested in. Even while we were in New York, the ambassador of Canada would take us out for lunch, knew us on a first-name basis. And this wasn't the same in all the other countries that were being represented there. And one of the things that this really got me thinking was how much of my success was attributed to the different social programs and developmental opportunities that I had growing up. Something simple like library programs, public parks, school sports, scholarships, OSAP, for those of us that might be from Ontario. It's the student loans program. that allow us to go to school, that allow us to really live up to our self-actualization. And so one of the primary points that I'm trying to convey to all of you today is stay foolish and stay hungry. You know, there are going to be many moments in your life where you'll come across a really great opportunity and you'll think to yourself, oh, I'm probably not good enough for this, or I can't do this. But just kick yourself in the butt and go out and do it, apply to it. Meet people, ask them lots of questions, and put yourself in those situations and those opportunities. To be honest, the way I got into the UN opportunity was sort of by luck. I was taking a grad trip with some of my friends to Europe, and right before I was about to take off on the plane, I had a friend just forward me this link. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to spend 9 hours on a plane anyway. Might as well fill this out. Maybe I won't get it. Maybe I will if I'm lucky. And then 2 days later, I had a Skype interview. And then 2 weeks later, I was in New York. So it just happened very organically, you know, maybe by luck. But we all have that opportunity within us. We all have that moment where we can go, and we all have that same potential. So I would encourage each and every one of you to just keep looking forward. Don't look back. Thanks.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much, Hassan. So now we're going to hear from Derek Juneau. And Derek is the Vice President, Business Development of MealShare. And this comes out of some of his education and his desire to make a difference, integrating that in day-to-day life. And MealShare was named the Canadian Social Venture of the Year by the Canadian Small Business Achievement Awards. So join me in welcoming and listening to Derek.
Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing today? Yes. So this is what's going to happen today. I'm going to put in a lot of energy. You guys are going to put in a little bit of energy. So when I ask you questions, just give me a little love back, okay? So we're going to try that one more time. How's everyone doing today? Oh, my gosh. 40,000 people in this room. This is amazing. That's fantastic. So as you heard, my name is Derek Juneau, and I'm going to be talking to you about two things today. The first one is something I'm really passionate about, which is MealShare. I talk about it a lot, and we're going to talk a little bit about the movement we're creating and the impact we're trying to really have here in Canada and around the world. And then the second thing I wanted to be talking to you about is our story. So the story about MealShare, how it came to be and why it exists. So to jump right into it, what is MealShare? Well, MealShare is a buy one, give one hunger relief program that takes place in restaurants. But before I get into the what and the how, I always like to talk a little bit about the why. Why does MealShare exist? Why do we do what we do? And why do you care? So our why in the end and our reason for existing is because youth hunger is far too apparent of a problem. It's too much of a problem in our own backyards throughout Canada and around the world. Right now in Manitoba, 1 in every 3.5 children are considered to be living below the poverty line and are food insecure. That's crazy to think. It's 1 in 5 in BC, the province that I live. Also, around the world, 3.1 million children die every year just because they don't have access to food, of hunger. Now, these are hard statistics to think about. So here's one that isn't. Every single day in Canada, 8 million people dine out. So what if we could turn this dining out into helping out? What if every single time you went out for a meal, you were providing a meal to a youth in need? What if we were the first generation where hunger wasn't an issue anymore? That's the kind of world that I want to live in, and that's our dream at MealShare. We want to one day be sitting in our rocking chairs, old and gray. Well, hopefully by this time it's hover chairs. Please, please, please. And be talking to our grandkids and be telling them about how when we were younger, hunger used to be this massive problem. And we want that to be just so unimaginable for them because it isn't anymore. So we really want meal share to be part of the solution to ending youth hunger in our lifetime. So that's really our why. So now the what and the how. So how does meal share work? So great question, by the way, great question. Meal share works because we partner with restaurants. We partner with the best restaurants across Canada, and we put our little logo, that logo right there, beside a few menu items on a menu. So if you, a conscious consumer, were to come to one of our meal share partners, like Original Joe's, which I know there's a bunch here in Winnipeg, one of our biggest supporters, and you ordered one of these meal share branded menu items, you'd be getting your meal just like normal, but you're also providing another meal to a youth in need. No extra action for you, no extra cost for you, just simply buy one, give one. It's that simple. Buy a meal, give a meal. Now, I'm sure you're probably wondering, but Derek, how do the meals actually be given to the kids that need them? Great question. You guys are on the ball. Fantastic stuff. We work with local charity partners in every city that we're in, and then we have our one international charity partner, Save the Children Canada. So half the meals that we provide stay local, the other half go international. So as far as meals go, we're only working with organizations that are really using meals as a handshake. They're the thing that really starts things off. So either meals that incentivize education, or meals that are exposing families to programs that are really going to change their lives. So those are the organizations we want to be working with. So where are we today? Another fantastic question. Meal shares across 8 different cities across Canada. We have over 300 restaurant partners on board right now. By the end of June, we'll have about 350. We're just breaking out into the States right now. Just launched in Austin, which is really, really exciting. A lot of exciting stuff happening, but the thing that we're most excited about is the fact that we've been able to provide over 1.3 million meals to people in need just because people like you are ordering food. And you're being conscious about it. You're realizing that every single time you swipe that credit card or you spend $1 or $2, you're voting. You're voting with your wallets, and that's such an important thing to think about. So that's meal share. That's how it works. Now I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the story behind meal share. And that story starts with these 2 cute kids. These are actually the 2 founders of meal shares, 2 of my best friends. Jeremy's on the left, Andrew's on the right. They're just scarfing down some pancakes, a good pancake breakfast. And they're actually cousins. So Jeremy and Andrew actually had a very normal upbringing. They went to high school, university, graduated from business school. Jeremy became an accountant, unfortunately for him. I'm just kidding, I love accountants. Andrew became a consultant, both working for amazing organizations. And from the outside looking in, you would think that everything would be great. But as we all know, looks can sometimes be deceiving. Both Andrew and Jeremy, after about a year, were very unhappy. Even though that they had the great job, they were making tons of money, and they had this great, safe life plan moving forward. But they both realized that, hey, if we stick on this trajectory, if we stay on this path, we're going to be dedicating our lives to making rich companies richer. And that's not something that we're really passionate about. So figuring out that they weren't aligned in their values with what they were doing was something really, really important. Jeremy and Andrew are very stereotypical entrepreneurs, so they were always trading ideas back and forth. And there was one idea that just wouldn't go away, and it was that idea to open up their own restaurant where every meal that you'd order would provide another meal to someone in need. Now, I'm so glad they didn't actually do that because the restaurant industry is kind of a hard industry to get into if you have no experience. But that was the first iteration of meal share. And at the time, I was actually in Cambodia teaching English at an orphanage. And I, as well, really wanted to do something to give back. I really shouldn't have been teaching. I'm severely dyslexic, and the last thing I should have been teaching was English, but I was. I had a great time, but I was seeing poverty at such a raw level, and it was really hard for me to see. And of course, I wanted to do something as well, but I just didn't know how to give back. I didn't know what to do. And luckily, it was around this time that I was calling up a bunch of my friends, reconnecting with everyone, and I was chatting with Andrew on Skype. And he pitched me an idea that was so simple, yet so impactful. It blew me away, and that was meal share. So I came home from traveling, we started meal share, and that was about 4 years ago. So why do I tell you this story? I tell you this story for 2 reasons. The first being which is I want you to realize that there's no personality type to having impact. Whether you're a stereotypical entrepreneur like these guys, or you're just someone that wants to give back and make a difference in this world, you can. I think all that's needed is what Hassan was talking about, is putting yourself in positions to get lucky. And so what do I mean by that? I mean that you can't really I think luck is a real thing, but I don't think you can get lucky unless you're putting yourself into opportunities to get lucky. So if you're in your underwear at home watching Netflix and eating donuts all day, it's going to be very, very tough to get really great opportunities to come along. But if you're out there getting involved, you're volunteering, and you're getting involved in your community, that's, like Asan said, that's when magic happens. So do that. And lastly, second of all, I think people hear our story sometimes and they think, oh, well, like, you guys could do that. You could have success and impact, and good for you. But maybe you're super, super smart, and maybe you come from wealthy families, or you had tons of connections, what have you. I'm here to abolish that thought. These guys are definitely below average intelligence, I can assure you that. Don't tell them I said that. No, but in all seriousness, I'm dyslexic. I couldn't read until I was in grade 6. We all had very middle-of-the-road GPAs. None of us come from wealthy families, and we had no connections when we started Mealshare. But what we did have was persistence. We knew that we had to ask a lot of questions and ask for a lot of help, and we did that relentlessly. And we didn't stop. We just kept moving forward, baby step by baby step, and that's important. So if there's one thing that you guys take away from today, is that each and every single one of you can have an absolutely massive impact in this world. I don't care your race, your skin color, your religion, your background, anything at all. If you have the drive, all you have to do is decide and go for it. There's a great quote by the Dalai Lama that goes along the lines of, if you think you're too little to have an impact, try sleeping in the room with a mosquito. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
So for the panel, our last speaker before we go to discussions is Sadia. I'm sorry, Sadia. I knew that was your name. Sadia is a freelance journalist, a photographer, and a writer. And much of her work is in raising difficult issues to wide audiences, often when people are not necessarily expecting to learn what they do learn from her. She's been recognized by the Women's Executive Network's Top 100, Canada's Most Powerful Women Award, as well as her work has been noted by large publications such as the Toronto Star and the Globe and Mail. So will you please join me in welcoming Sadia?
So today I want to speak to you about a couple things. I am very grateful to be here. I remember about 15 years ago sitting where you guys are all sitting, wondering what I was going to do with my life and whether I was going to be able to make the impact or take opportunities the way I wanted to. It was a particularly difficult time in my life. And so now, being here on this stage, 15 years later, looking back, I want to thank you all for having me here and for giving me the chance to speak to you all and perhaps pass on a bit of the lessons that I've learned over the last few years. I was born in Pakistan in a small town called Sargodha, which is, and my family, my mom and dad came to Canada with me as refugees. They were escaping religious persecution. And over the course of the next 26 years, they spent their lives really struggling to create opportunities for themselves. My dad had this really weird name, and so it was hard for him to find a job and for people to give him a chance. My mom was a teacher in Pakistan. She had a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Education, and she got no more than high school equivalency here in Canada. And so that really created an issue in terms of having an income and being able to survive. They also had 2 kids, my brother and sister. And so with 3 children, my mom thought, well, how on earth am I going to raise these kids? So what she did was she went to school, she went to Sheridan College, she got a diploma, and she became a daycare provider. And that gave her the opportunity to be a teacher, but at home with children. And over the course of the next many years, what she ended up seeing was that one violation turned into another. She experienced domestic violence and ended up getting a divorce, becoming a single parent, and raising the three of us on her own. I think she's the most courageous woman I know because she took basically nothing and turned it into a lifetime of work where she raised three children who are all now public servants in one way or another. So the story really, I think, goes back to looking at your own life. I'm sure many of you in this room have parents who are trying to either put food on the table, to make it, or you know of someone in your life who has really struggled to try and make ends meet. But it is possible. It is possible to grow up and to find those opportunities. And one of the ways in which I was able to do that was that I found my tribe. Very early on, as I mentioned, my mom was a home daycare provider. There was a woman who ended up bringing her two daughters to our daycare. Her name is Miriam Weerasuriya. She's Sri Lankan. She married Brian Downey, who is, how should I say it, a really nice white guy from Scarborough, Ontario. And what I saw through their lives were two people who came from very different worlds, but created a really beautiful family. And that became an example for me on the way I wanted to live my life. Miriam gave me thousands of car rides to school over the course of that time. So every morning she would pick me up when I was in university and she would drive me to Kipling Station, that's in Toronto. And from there I would take the subway to school, to the University of Toronto. And it was over those car rides that she and I had hundreds of conversations. She and I shared everything you could possibly imagine. And all I did over those hundreds of car rides was listen. I listened to her life. I listened to the way that she and Brian are raising their children. I learned about the kinds of things that I wanted to do in my own life to raise a family and to contribute. I saw a woman who contributed to her church choir, who contributed to her community, and in small little ways built a life for herself where she became a role model for everyone around her. And that was inspiring for me. I saw women in my community who, through the little things they did, ended up creating something big. So sometimes, when I was in high school, I often thought, well, how am I going to make a difference in the world? And what I learned from my role models was that you can make a difference in everything that you do. It can be from having really difficult conversations, whether it's with your parents or with a friend. You can listen. You can see if a friend of yours perhaps is going through a difficult time and you can support them. You can maybe visit a First Nations community. How many of us have actually been able to go to a First Nations community and to actually listen to their stories? The incredible work that elders are doing can teach us so much about who we are as a country. A couple of years ago, I had this amazing opportunity to meet an elder. Her name is Elizabeth Panashaway, and she's an Innu First Nations elder from Labrador. And when she was talking to us, she was telling me about this walk that she does into the mountains of Labrador every year. And it's her opportunity to bring her grandchildren and children from the community to the land, to where her birthplace is. She was born in the Mealy Mountains of Labrador. And as she was talking about this, I imagined what it would be like to actually join her, to listen to her, and to learn from the lessons that she could teach me. So a couple months later, I called her and I said, Elizabeth, can I come and join you? And I ended up joining her for 3 weeks. We traveled over 250 kilometers through the mountains. And over the course of those 3 weeks, I listened. I listened to her stories of being taken off the land. I listened to what it was like to be forcibly removed from one's homeland. And I realized that it brought me closer to my own experience of being removed from Pakistan and coming to Canada, not because we wanted to, but because we had to. And so Elizabeth, this woman who I had no idea about, actually taught me so much about my own identity and who I am as a person. So after you leave today, you're going to go back You're going to see your parents and your friends, and you're going to talk to each other in the audience. I encourage you to really listen and to have those conversations, because that's where human rights work really begins. It begins with talking to each other, to contributing to your own communities. There's lots of work to be done out there. There's no shortage of it, I'm sure, as you've heard from all of us. But each of you has an opportunity where you can do a lot. One of the greatest lessons I learned was from actually young people who I worked with at a food bank. In Ontario, there's an opportunity to do 40 hours of public service, volunteer work. And so I decided that after I graduated university, I came back to my own community of Mississauga, and I ended up working at a food bank. And there I met hundreds of kids, young people. Some were in middle school, though we had to make sure they were okay to work in a warehouse. Some were in high school, some were in university themselves. A lot of them came because they had to do 40 hours of high school volunteer in order to graduate from high school. But many of them ended up staying because they realized the impact that they were having, not just on their community, but on individuals. It was those moments where they gave a mother who needed formula, baby formula, when she otherwise couldn't afford it. It was those moments when a young man would come in who had an education, who thought he had done everything right, but just couldn't find a job and couldn't make ends meet. And so meeting those young people and seeing how they ended up staying because of that connection they found to their own community gave me fulfillment. Whoops. And so I would encourage you all to look in your own backyard, to listen and to have those conversations, because those are the moments that are going to open opportunities. And go find your mentors. They're all out there. They're willing to help you. Thank you.
Okay, so we have time for some questions, yes?
Yes, so I'll ask the youth ambassadors who are working the microphones to come up to the aisles again, and any youth with questions to line up with them there. So in the interest of time and trying to get through as many questions as possible, if it's all right with the panel, we'll ask 2 or 3 questions at a time, and then you guys can answer as a group. So why don't we start on this side here?
Hi, my name is Sky, and I'm from Kelowna, BC. I was wondering about the Blue Dot movement put on by the David Suzuki Foundation, and I was wondering how plausible do you think that is, and the implications of that, considering the legal and economical aspects.
That's to you, Derek.
I don't know about the Blue Dot program, so I can't really speak to that.
Sorry, it is the entrenchment of water rights in our Canadian Charter of Rights, and I was just wondering, because this is a human rights forum, and how the environmental rights and human rights kind of combined.
You've stumped us. Well done.
Yeah.
Next question. We'll see what we can
So we're going to take 2 questions on Adams Road and then 2 on Kaylin. Please.
Hi there, my name is Jason from Richmond, British Columbia. So all 3 panelists mentioned a lot about taking opportunities and getting out of your comfort zone. So I was wondering, are there any opportunities, activities, or programs that you guys are aware of that changed your life and will change ours as well?
So before we answer, we'll just
Hi, my name is Lakita Kusuri, and I'm from Vancouver, BC. My question is to Asan and Sadea. I myself am an immigrant. I came here when I was 8 years old, around the same age as you two, and my worldview of human rights and how my experience has been sort of different to my peers who were born here and who were raised here. How has that impacted your career and your worldview of human rights and how they should be treated to us?
Let's start with that. That's a specific question, so why not?
Yeah, that's one of the things that Mary Lou mentioned, which was really powerful, is balancing the economic perspective and the human rights perspective. Because like you and Sadia, my parents, or maybe not like you, but a lot of immigrants, the case is that they face very tough economic challenges. Mm-hmm. And as the first, almost like the breadwinners within the family, you have to study hard, become a doctor and an engineer, and make good money and raise the family status. And I think human rights is something you can incorporate into your life at any point in your life. So the first part of that is taking care of yourself and setting your own goals, and then incorporating civil duty wherever you can outside of that. And while I'm speaking about this, the program that really changed my life is called the Redfish School of Change, which is based out of the University of Victoria in BC. Over the course of 6 weeks, they take students and they take them through an experiential learning program in the heart of the Kootenay Valley. So I grew up in Toronto, was a city boy through and through, and all of a sudden, in my first year of university, I was trekking through rivers and river valleys and hiking up glaciers over the course of 6 weeks, and it threw me out of my comfort zone. It made me realize that the environment and sustainability is what I want to dedicate my life towards. So Redfish School of Change, check it out.
And maybe we could ask Sadia and Derek as well for suggestions.
Sure. I know of a really great program called Students on Ice, so that's something to look into. I was really impacted by two programs, and this was when I was in my early 20s. One is called Action Canada, and the other, which actually Senator McFedrin's son was also a part of, is the Jeanne Sauvé Fellowship, based out of Montreal. And the Jeanne Sauvé program allows for 12 or 13 people to live together for a year in a house. Can you imagine 12 of you together for an entire year? The conversations, we always joke that we couldn't get through breakfast without having a really serious conversation about changing the world. But that was an amazing opportunity for me. But when you're in high school, sort of early university years or early adulthood, I would say Students on Ice. If you go to college or university or any kind of apprenticeship programs, I would encourage you to think about maybe traveling and working abroad. Usually most schools provide that kind of opportunity where you can link with another country or another school in another country to work abroad. I moved to Australia to do my master's in human rights, and that was an amazing year. I ended up following an indigenous rock band through the desert for a couple weeks, and there is nothing quite like being able to see the pain of exclusionary policies in somebody's eyes and to have to talk to them about what it has done in their life. So take a chance, find those opportunities, and there are tons of websites where you can find a lot of this information as well.
Really quickly, because I know we have a lot of questions. Great job, guys. I did a couple of humanitarian trips when I was younger that completely changed my world outlook. Made me really want to have a life of service, so that was huge. So just volunteering at a really young age. I went down to Mexico and built some houses 3 or 4 different times in the Baja Peninsula and some really rural communities, and that, again, that really changed me. But just volunteering, just getting out there and volunteering. There's a great organization that I'm a part of called SHAD, S-H-A-D, that takes high school students, and it's basically like a summer camp. Pretty amazing. You're smiling, so I know you've heard of it.
I'm going to Dalhousie.
Yeah, that's awesome. Go Shad. One of the biggest life hacks I always tell people about that I'm a big fan of is if you find an organization that you want an opportunity with, don't just look for the opportunities, find the organization you want an opportunity with, go to them, sit down, do as much research about them as you can, sit down with someone within their organization with coffee, they will sit down with you. You guys have this magic power because you're students. You just ask and they'll sit down with you. It's amazing. And then just try and figure out what they need help with or what you can provide them. Package it up very, very succinctly and say, hey, I would love to come in, work for free for 2 months. I'll do A, B, C, D, and E. You'll take all the work off of them for managing you, and they'll say yes. So just take the initiative.
I'd like to add just a general comment that applies to the previous responses without recommending any particular program. This is a very important, practical, achievable strategy. When you want to be connected to an individual or an organization because you believe there's an alignment from what they are doing and what you want to be doing, and you feel you can not only learn from them but contribute, exactly the strategy that Derek outlined. Don't wait to have someone reach out to you. Don't wait for the offer to come to you. don't need their approval before you take that first step. Take the risk, research the opportunity, offer what it is that you want to be doing. And when people who are busy and are doing interesting, good work meet other people, particularly young people, who lay themselves out and say, I want to work with you because, and this is what I can bring, and you create that trust right from the beginning that we can rely on you. We can work together. We can find ways to support each other and grow together. So please don't hesitate, but also please don't expect to be taken care of. Figure out a lot of the introduction yourselves. What is it you can give? What is it that you want? And then go for it.
So we have an online question as well, asking about, the speakers talked about, putting yourselves in a position to get lucky and a good opportunity, and what would the first steps to be to get in a position like that?
Okay, maybe each one can give one step.
Sure. I would say work really hard and connect with people. I know we've sort of mentioned these already, but I can't emphasize how important it is to reach out and to connect to someone. If I hadn't connected with Elizabeth Panashaway and built that early trust with her and then continue to build that early trust with her, because trust is not something that's a one-day thing. You really have to continuously build it. There's no way I would have been able to do a 3-week, walk. I say walk because it wasn't really a walk, through the mountains of Labrador. You have to take those opportunities, but really go for it. Connect with people. And not just to get something out of it, but because you can contribute. Relationships are trust-based and they're a two-way street. They cannot go one way. Often what I have found is when young people and individuals in general want to go out and they want to seek opportunities, they go to seek them. But go because you know you can also contribute. You bring your story as much as another person brings their story. So take those opportunities, build the trust, whether it's with an organization or an individual, and pursue your dreams because it's entirely possible.
Thank you. Derek.
Yeah, really quickly, 2 things. Read the book, How to Make Friends and Influence People. It is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, the title, not great, I think, but amazing content, and the takeaway and value you get from that is amazing. And just start becoming a fantastic networker. And when I say networker, again, really focusing on what Sadia said, is that relationships are a two-way street. Two-way. And so really just being genuine, being you, and connecting and seeing the world as everyone's another friend, and just meeting as many people as possible.
Hassan.
And to be able to, just to build on the previous 2 points, to be able to be good at networking involves, I think, 2 things. Number 1 is asking really good questions and getting people to open up. And number 2 is having knowledge about a specific area that you can contribute to that conversation.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I have the unpopular task of saying we are out of time. So before we say thank you to our speakers, I will invite 4 of the traveling youth with the 150&Me project to recognize their contribution to speak with us today.
Thank you. While our youth speakers are coming up, I just want to make a general invitation to everybody in the audience. As you may know, I'm a relatively new independent senator, and when the Prime Minister asked me what my priorities would be in coming to the Senate, I said it was to bring the Senate to youth and youth to the Senate. So if you're thinking about a trip to Ottawa, if you're thinking about coming to look at where government is based, let my office know. Senator Mary Lou McPhedran, we welcome youth. We will facilitate your time, and we'd be very, very happy to make it the best possible visit to Ottawa that's possible. Thank you. Oh, thank you. It's lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay.
Pour notre dernière séance, nous aimerions vous offrir la possibilité de discuter des...
For the next one, we'd like to hear about the ideas expressed by each person today. Each group has a representative to speak for them, and we'd like to invite them up on the stage.
In the discussion. If there's time left at the end, of course, we will invite comments and questions, so please come up to the stage. So just say what group you're from and you guys get to go first.
So we're going to start with group 1.
Hi, so we're part of group 1. I'm Maya Wallace from Minnedosa.
And I'm Julia Tomlinson from Minnedosa.
So our group primarily discussed Indigenous issues, including access to clean water, emergency services, and food security. As humans, we all have the right to these things, as they are essential to human life. So by denying Indigenous people these services, and we are not upholding our country's Charter of Rights. Our group discussed the steps that need to be taken to solve these issues. The first step is to educate the public and raise awareness. Many people aren't aware of the problems faced by Canada's Indigenous population. The more people that are aware, the more people that can make changes. Members of our group talked about how they learned about world issues in school and how this compelled them to become involved in human rights. This shows how beneficial education is in the battle for an equal and just world. The second step is to build relationships between different communities and people. If we have strong relationships between Indigenous communities, our government, and everyone else in our country, we can work together to make the world a better place. As individuals, we can make a difference by exercising self-reflection, recognizing our own biases, having conversations with our families and friends, and using social media to raise a positive awareness of issues on a more global scale. Thank you.
So we're going to go with group 2 now. 3.
Okay, my name is Teresa Becker, and I'm from Swan River, Manitoba. Okay. My group talked about 4 main points, and the first is change. Some things like we want to make immediate change to, like equality for Indigenous people, but sometimes we need to use patience and make gradual change, such as laws and trying to persuade other countries to change their laws. And and the second point is Canada's place on the global stage.
You can take a break, just do deep breath and continue with
Many of us believe that we should be an example to the other countries and just be peacekeepers, but in some specific circumstances, more force is required. The third point is violence. We are talking about when violence is justified, depending on the situation and the severity. Violence is never justified when there's an imbalance of power. States should not use violence on their own people. The fourth point is, what can we do? What can we specifically do? As a country, we can encourage countries to respect human rights and be a role model to those countries. We use our soft powers, such as trading, to encourage them to change. As the youth of Canada, we can educate people about human rights in the other countries so that they know where they stand and what they're entitled to.
Hi, my name is Lakita Kasuri, and I'm from Vancouver, and my group is Group 8. We had a very interesting group, and we had lots of responses, and the first question that we were asked was, how is the treatment of the Aboriginal community or society in Canada, and why are they being reconciled with really early on, really late, and what, as youth, what we can do to help, and what the government or the society around us is doing to help that. So we've decided that the Aboriginal people who have lived in our country for longer than we can even think, they deserve the same rights as everyone else, and that they deserve the same stances as everyone else. We even had the debate of equality versus equity, and how that has also made a difference in how people approach the situation. For instance, the reserves that most Aboriginal peoples do live on, their resources are very poor. They don't have clean water, they don't have proper schools, and they do not have the same opportunities as normal youth of Canada do, or even people of Canada. And we thought that maybe making that aware and bringing on the knowledge to the general public and even to the government who are making these decisions, that there needs to be change, and there needs to be more improvement in the living situations and the basic needs of these people. The second question was, as youth, how can we get involved in this, and how come there's more awareness but not action? It's very easy to talk about important subjects like this, and it's very easy to bring awareness to subjects like this, but action and taking action, even as youth or as adults, is always difficult. As youth, you have this responsibility to maintain more than one thing in your life, such as education, friends, activities, etc. So being an activist and being someone who has that sort of patience and time to do something like this, it takes more than you think. And so what we thought was maybe working on baby steps, on tiny steps, and taking as many chances as we can to work with local governments, to work with local politicians, or even with local activists who are part of these organizations for longer than we've thought. The third question was, we didn't really get to it, but the overall summary of our conversation was the fact that there's been lots of injustice going on for these communities, and that there needs to be recognition for them. Obviously, it's easier said than done, but there should be change, and there should be change in ways that can be done by youth and not in ways that we can't do. Youth are really important, and we have this stance and the time on our hands to do something like this. So if we're given the right resources, we will definitely get the job done, and we'll do it better than we can ever have thought. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Solgi, and I'm from Ottawa.
Salut, je m'appelle Joséphine et je viens d'Edmonton.
I'm Josephine, and I come from Edmonton.
I'd just like to highlight that within our group discussion, which was actually more like a group conversation, that some individuals were brave enough to share their own experiences with Indigenous discrimination and with missing and murdered Indigenous women. And we'd just like to thank them for their bravery and for sharing their stories.
Nous devons reconnaître les gens qui ont partagé.
And we would like to thank the people who shared their perspective and a personal experience with the missing and murdered Indigenous women. We would like to thank those people, and we have the greatest respect for you.
Some of the key discussion points within our group conversation, we spoke of the fine line between isolation, integration, and assimilation of Indigenous communities.
Discussing those points, we discussed the limits between isolation, integration of the different elements of our society.
The importance of using our age as youth as to our advantage in educating the younger generation and those younger than us as they look up to us, as well as the older people and the adults as we are respected by both parties.
We also said how, as adolescents, we have to use our age to our advantage to educate the younger generations and the adults in society, and we are respected by both communities, and we have a voice.
That the relationship between the mainstream Canadian society as well as the federal government of Canada and Indigenous communities of Canada has often been fractured throughout history. And we as two separate societies are different, and that's true. However, despite this, we are equal and must work together.
It's clear that the relationship between the Indigenous population and Canadian society at large is very fractured. We have history to back us up on that, but we're very equal, and we have to work together as partners.
We discussed hope in our futures, and that in terms of tangible goals, we as the youth here at the Human Rights Forum can go back to our hometowns and make a difference. Whether this is a small difference, talking to your friends or your family, or whether you have a platform or an organization that you can make this difference in. And just to further reiterate the fact that we were all chosen to come here for a reason.
In conclusion, when you return to your communities, use your voice and your wisdom to change things. It's not that difficult. You can do small steps and make a difference. And you were chosen to participate in this forum for a reason, so use this, and you have to be really confident in what you can do.
So hi, my name is Shabneet.
Hi, my name is Serenity.
And we are in grade 9 from Miles McDonnell Collegiate. And some of the important points that we discussed in our discussion were that the reservation school's funding should be like the same as the public school funding because it's a little less. In today's society, education is really important, and like jobs and all those rely on their education.
So we also talked about ways how we can enforce our basic human rights without violating people's religion, because we have the right to religion. So we thought that we need to be enforcing our rights. So if we see something that's a violation of rights, we need to stand up and take action to it without, and if it's crossing over with a religion, like we talked about how you can't do that.
We should also have volunteers going around to schools to make our youth and students aware of the Indigenous rights and human rights violation. Also letting them know what their fundamental rights are, because there are youth that their rights are being violated, but they just don't know if they actually are because they're not aware of their fundamental rights. Also, we have to make people aware of the human rights violation, not just in Canada, but around the world, because if we make a change, it should be globally, not just in Canada. In Canada, there are human rights violations as well, like the Indigenous women go missing and they get murdered. And Canada isn't perfect, even though it's developed. We have become a good role model, but we're decent, let's say. Like, we're not perfect. Like, there's no one's perfect, so, yeah. Canada should react in a positive way to a crisis or a conflict before it's too late. So like the North Korea crisis, Canada stopped its import and export with North Korea in order to pressurize them so they don't bomb the US. So we should, just like any other crisis that's occurring around the world, Canada should react positively before it's too late. Thank you very much.
So, my name is Jacinta Haligowski. I'm from Winnipeg, and I was in Group 5. And in our breakout session, we talked about multiple issues and ideas involving Canada on a local, national, and global scale. We talked about human rights, and especially Aboriginal ones. Lots of people in the group expressed that they want to see and hear more about issues, not just Aboriginal ones, global and national, on the news, and hear about it and read about it in the newspaper as such, because a lot of crises aren't covered. We also agreed that the conditions in reserves, on Aboriginal reserves, aren't very suitable for living. Schools on reserves get 30% less funding than public ones. This limits education on reserves because some schools may not have the supplies to supply sufficient learning material. We also talked about how there are stereotypes surrounding the Indigenous community. This could be limiting people to what action they take against poverty on reserves or other issues such as missing and murdered Indigenous women. As well, we decided that to even play a small part in resolving these issues, more tools should be made to Canadians to be able to take part. An important part about these issues as well is making sure that the Aboriginal people have a voice. Without them, it's kind of pointless because we're working for a cause that involves them, and to not have them involved wouldn't make sense because we wouldn't get input from them. And they know more than anyone else what they need, don't you think? Another question we thought about was, can human rights be universal? Of course they can. Human rights are the basic needs for every human, no matter where you come from. No one said it was impossible. Most said yes, they can be. But it takes a lot of work. With terrorism and everything affecting the globe, we might have to do a little bit of work to get it universal. That leads into my next point. This generation has so much potential to make the world a better place. This generation has so many brilliant minds. Many people are thinking, like, this is the generation that's going to change the world. And you may think that puts a lot of pressure on us. But if you look at it as motivation, that pushes us to work even harder. And I'm not talking to do gigantic things, just gigantic things, to do things in your family, with your friends, your community, your school, to even have little group discussions or meetings. Those things matter. So we feel like our generation is given a huge chance to make a change in the world and in our country, and we're very excited to take it. So be bold. We together can make an influence as a country. Other countries are watching us, so maybe if they see what we're doing, they'll follow in our footsteps. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Miriam Basari from Winnipeg. I was in Group 7. In our breakout session, we discussed how, as Canadians, we need to look in our own backyard and clean up our neighborhood, clean up our yard before cleaning up our neighbors or our communities. We also talked about how, at times, we find ourselves talking the talk but not walking the walk. And Experience Canada and the amazing speakers and so many volunteers, including our host, our youth ambassadors, and so many people behind the scenes have given us the opportunity today to talk the talk and given us the chance to walk a walk. We also talked about the different barriers about our Indigenous communities are facing and how they're incomparable to third world countries and how they're both large problems and should be addressed and used as different resources to help everyone no matter where they are, whether they're 5 miles away or 1,000 miles away. Canada's 150 is a chance for all of us to walk the walk even with high heels on. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ben McIntyre. I'm from Winnipeg, Manitoba. One of the things that our group discussed was different ways we can raise awareness about First Nations, problems that First Nations people face. These problems are specifically relevant on reserves. Some problems like not having clean drinking water, or having bad health care, or the suicide epidemic. We decided that we needed to find new ways to distribute funds, and how we need to raise awareness for some of these issues that may not receive as much media attention. One of the things we decided is that one of the ways to share this information and to try to raise awareness would be through social media. But of course, using social media, we have to be aware of of the information that we're spreading and making sure that it is not false. Another thing that we discussed is that there's a lot of education that is being given to a younger generation, which is fantastic. But one of the things that we might need to do in the future is actually try to educate older generations, because like all of our parents, or almost all of our parents, hadn't really learned about the residential schools or anything like that. And so we have to, instead of just focusing on the younger generations, which we absolutely should do, we also have to focus on all of Canada, not just the next generation. We agreed that Canada should be involved in global peacekeeping, but we noted that almost all of us would not actually be willing to go into a war zone on a peacekeeping mission, and that going into fight groups might not be Canada's best place on the global stage, and that we might be better suited to send in medics and teachers and funds and take in refugees from those war zones. We also agreed that a way for Canada to help make the world a better place is to lead by example. But of course, we can only lead by example once we have set a good example. So we must start by first fixing the problems that we face at home before trying to look abroad. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour votre participation. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for your participation.
Ceci conclut la période réservée aux...
So this is the end of the presentation of our youth. Thank you very much for the incredible energy that you have shown, each and every one of you, in today's discussion. Alors, donnons des applaudissements à nos commanditaires, TD Bank Group, Great West Life, The Mackin Foundation, Great West Life, WestJet, The Foundation Manitoba, le gouvernement du Manitoba et Expérience Canada. Alors, on les applaudit bien fort.
So before we leave today, we have two things to ask of you. First, we are now handing out evaluation forms for today's event. For those of you participating online, a link to the evaluation survey will be posted at the end of the session, and another one forwarded to your email. We kindly ask you to take the time to fill out these evaluations. Our funders at the Department of Canadian Heritage value the opinion and feedback of participants in the programs they support. Your active input will help ensure that more youth-led events and opportunities like this one happen in the future. We have also included a ballot for you to complete, voting for up to 3 on-site youth participants and 3 online youth participants that you would like to represent Canada at the National Forum.
First of all, we are distributing an assessment form for the event of today. For those of you who are doing this online, there will be a link. Posted at the end of the session, and another one forwarded to your email. And we kindly ask you to please take the time to fill it out. Secondly, we need your help to choose who's going to go to Ottawa. You can vote for yourself or for someone else. For those of you participating online, you are also going to receive a link via internet.
Before you leave today, and we will collect them on the way out. Look for one of the staff or youth ambassadors wearing the red tags. Thank you for your tremendous participation today, and whether or not you will be continuing on to Ottawa, be proud of yourselves for the role you've taken and played today. Your voice matters, and your actions do make a difference in ensuring Canada continues to become more welcoming and a more inclusive society, and a model of diversity for other countries.
Thank you very much to all of you. It was really an inspiration to see all of you and to hear you discuss of human rights. I hope that you are going to continue to have this kind of discussion when you go home and in your communities. More than anything else, please continue to voice your opinion. You can be very proud of the role that you played today. Thank you very much for the youth of Manitoba schools. They came here in large numbers. We definitely appreciate your presence, and I hope to see you in Ottawa. Thank you very much.